sexuality are linked with fantasies about gender, and certain ways of living gender require certain kinds of sexual practices. There are significant and widespread discontinuities between gender norms and normative sexuality, as we know. But in relation to both gender and sexuality, none of us has the choice of creating ourselves ex nihilo. We are transformed and acted upon prior to any action we might take, and though we can radically rework our genders or even try to rework our sexualities, although often failing, interestingly, we are in the grip of norms even as we struggle against them. In my view, gender is a passionate comportment, a way of living the body with and for others, and although sexuality is not reducible to gender in any sense, it is crafted and mobilized by signifiers, certainly including signifiers of gender, that none of us actually choose. You might decide on what kinds of sexual relations you want. Indeed, you might decide who enters you and whom you would like to enter, but even then, you're not deciding on the passion. You are deciding about what to do about something that is in part already decided for you, something that is prior to deliberation and never fully within its purview. You are given over before you decide where and when to give yourself over. Performativity is, in my view, a process that implies being acted on in ways we do not always fully understand, and also of acting in politically consequential ways. Performativity has everything to do with who can be produced as a recognizable subject, a subject whose living is recognized as such, whose life is worth sheltering, and whose life, when lost, would be worthy of mourning. Precarious life characterizes such lives who do not qualify as recognizable, readable, or even grievable. And in this way, precarity is a rubric that brings together women, queers, transgender people, the poor, and the stateless. It is worth remembering that one of the main questions, and here I'm drawing to the end of my remarks for those of you who need air and water and other human essentials. It is worth remembering that one of the main questions that queer theory posed in light of the AIDS crisis was this: how does one live with the notion that one's love is not considered love and one's loss is not considered loss? How does one live an unrecognizable life? Indeed, how does one die an unmournable death? If what and how you love is already a kind of nothing or non-existence, how can you possibly explain the loss of this non-thing? And how would it ever become publicly grievable? Something similar happens when the loss or disappearance of whole populations becomes unmentionable, or when the law itself prohibits an investigation of those who have committed such atrocities. We certainly know many instances of that. For the queer movement, this was emphatically the case with AIDS, and it remains the situation on the African continent, and for all those populations throughout the globe who have no access to new drugs or no way to pay for them. These are but a few of the ways in which the differential distribution of grievability takes place, and when it does not actually lead to the annihilation of those who are already socially lost or socially dead, it ties them in knots without hope of ever becoming freed from those knots. In the end, the question of how performativity links with precarity might be summed up in these more important questions. How does the unspeakable population speak and make its claims? What kind of disruption is this within the field of power? How can such populations lay claim to what they require in order to persist? The point is not to make everyone more human, but to situate the human in a wider network of life and to struggle for those modes of recognition that ameliorate precarity and to fight against those dominant norms that expose us to a precarity with no recourse to political agency. It is not only that we need to live in order to act, but that we have to act and act politically in order to secure the conditions of existence. Sometimes the norms of recognition bind us in ways that imperil our capacity to live? What if the gender that establishes norms required in order for us to be recognizable, also do violence to us, or imperil our very survival? Under those conditions, the very categories which appear to promise us life take our life away. The point is not to accept such a double bind, but rather to struggle for modes of life in which the performative acts struggle against precarity so that we might live in new modes of existence, ones that are not yet fully recognizable, but still allow us to live. Thank you.